So ES6 was released in June 2015, which is states as a sixth edition of language. Initially, it was named ES6 and later named to ECMAScript 2050. This edition includes several new features that are modules, iterators, class, arrow functions, for of loop, for in loop, promises, and many more. It is developed by Brendan Ike. ECMAScript is the specification that is defined in ECMA 262 standard to create a general-purpose scripting language. Modern ES6 features are latent const keywords, default parameters, arrow functions, template literals, object destructuring, object literals, rest and spread operators, and like modules, classes, generators, and iterators, and promises, and async await functions, and many more features are introduced in ES6. First of all, they both are block scope, but the main difference between them is that the late variable can be updated easily, but it doesn't allow redeclaration into the scope. Whereas const variable cannot be updated as it is a constant, and it also doesn't allow to redeclaration into the scope. And the second difference is that to access the let variable, you need to initialize it first, and to access the const variable also needs initialization before uh, accessing it. And the third difference is that declaration of let variable can be done without initialization, whereas const variable cannot be declared without initializing them. So arrow functions are the shorthand notation to write ES6 functions, and the definition of arrow functions is consists of the parameter followed by an arrow, and then the body of the function. And arrow function is also called as fat arrow functions, and we cannot use arrow functions in the constructors. And there are some advantage of arrow functions, like it reduces code size, and it lexically bind the context, and the return statement is optional for a single line function, and the functional braces are also optional for a single line statement. So these are some advantage of arrow function. So a spread operator is represented by three dots. Basically, spread operator takes iterables such as arrays or string and expand that iterables into individual elements. It is also used to make a copies of JS objects. And another use of spread operator is that after using this spread operator, it makes a code concise and increase its readability. Rest parameter is represented by three dots. Basically, if we use rest parameter in any function parameter, then we can call that function with infinite number of arguments. Basically, take all of those arguments and convert them into an array, and then with the help of spread operator, we can expand that array. So generator is a special kind of function that can be paused in the middle either one or many time, and can be resumed later whenever needed. To convert a normal function into generator function, we need to add a asterisk sign after the function keyword and before the function name. And we must have to replace the return statement with the yield keyword. The generator function does not return its code. Instead, it returns a generator object, and whenever it encounters the yield keyword, it saves the state, pause itself right there, and resume the its execution when and we can call the next method which is available in the generator object, and it will it will resume the execution from where it was paused. So with the help of default parameter, we can initialize named parameter with the default values if there are no value or undefined path to that parameter. A set is a data structure that allows us to create a collection of unique values. It is a collection of values that are similar to arrays, but it does not include any duplicates. Before introduction of map, when we require the mapping of keys and values, we often use an object. So map object is a new collection type which is introduced in ES6. It holds the key value pairs in which any type of values can be used as either keys or values. So a map object always remembers the actual insertion order of the keys. Map are ordered so they traverse the elements in their insertion order. Using weak set, it is possible to store weakly held objects in a collection. As similar to the set, weak set cannot store the duplicate values. Weak set can be iterated, and weak set only includes add, delete, and has methods of the set object. When we require the mapping of key and values, we often use object. A weak map are almost similar to the maps, but the keys in weak maps must be objects. It stores each element as a key value pair where key are weakly referenced here. The keys are objects and the values are arbitrary. A weak map object iterates the elements in their insertion order. It includes only delete key, get key, hash key, and set key values method. A promise is an object which represents eventual completion of a asynchronous operation. Basically, promise is used for performing asynchronous task. It has three states: pending, fulfilled, and rejected. And once the promise is fulfilled or rejected, then it will be immutable. We can create the promise with the help of a promise constructor, and this promise constructor takes two functions as an argument, that is a resolve function and reject function, and based on the asynchronous operation it returns either the first argument or the second argument. So this is promise. Promise is an object which represents eventual completion of asynchronous operation. Basically, promise object is used for performing asynchronous task. It has three states. First is pending. Pending is the initial state of every promise. It represents that the result has not been computed till now. And then we have fulfilled. It represents the completion of operation. And then finally we have rejected. That represent the failure that occurs during the computation. And once the promise is fulfilled or rejected, then it will be immutable. And we can create the promise with the help of promise constructor, and this promise constructor takes two functions as an argument, that is resolve and reject, and based on the asynchronous operation it returns either the first argument or the second argument. Callback is used to handle the execution of function after the completion of execution of another function. A callback would helpful in working with event in the callback. A function can be passed as an argument to another function. Uh, it is the greatest way when we are dealing with the basic cases such as minimal asynchronous operation. Callback help when we develop a web application that includes a lots of code, then working with a callback is messy. This excessive callback nesting is often referred as callback help. uh, Babel is one of the most popular transpilers of JavaScript. It is mainly used for converting the ES6 plus code into a backward compatible version of JavaScript that can be run by previous JavaScript engines. Webpack is an open source JavaScript module bundler that takes modules with dependencies. It allows us to run the environment that hosts Babel. So if stands for immediately invoke function expression. If is nothing but the an anonymous function, and it gets immediately invoked. Basically, it is a self-invoking anonymous function. And second thing about if is that any kind of variable that we use inside the if is a local to that anonymous function. So this is the use if. When an event occurs on a DOM, that event does not entirely occurs on one element. In the bubbling phase, the event bubbles up, or it goes to its parent, then it goes its grandparent, and until it reaches all the way to the window. While in capturing phase, the event start from the window down to the element that trigger the event or the event target. Event propagation has three phases. Capturing phase.
target phase, and bubbling phase. So in capturing phase, the event starts from the window and then goes down to every element until it reaches the target element. Uh, in target phase, the event has reached the target element, and in bubbling phase, the event bubble up from the target element and then it goes up every element until it reaches the window. So this is the event. Destructuring is a great way to destructure or separate the values of an array or object into variables. So functional programming is a type of programming in which we build our application with the functions using expression that calculates a value without mutating or changing the arguments that are passed to it. JavaScript arrays has a map, filter, and reduce method, which are the most famous functions in functional programming because they don't mutate or change the array, which makes these functions pure and which are features of the functional programming language. We have other another examples like array.map method and array.filter method. Array.map method creates a new array with the result of calling a provided callback function on every element in an array. And array.filter method creates a new array with all elements that pass the test in callback function. An arrow function expression can be used as an alternative to old JavaScript function expression, but is limited and cannot be used all the time. Arrow functions are lexically bound to this keyword, unlike the normal function which are dynamically bound. And arrow functions cannot be used as a method and constructors. And arrow syntax bind in this to the surrounding. That means they are lexically scoped than the normal function which are dynamically scoped. The syntax given a return when there is a no body block, resulting a simpler code in same cases. Last but not the least, arrow is shorter and simpler than the function and function keyword. And all those stylistic issues are often subject to advantage of. And some advantage of arrow function is like the main advantage of arrow function is arrow function do not have a binding with this, that is arrow function do not have their own this keyword. And
Currying is a function that takes one argument at a time and returns a new function expecting the next argument. And curried functions are constructed by chaining closures by immediately returning their inner function simultaneously. And it is useful to avoid the problem of passing the same variable again and again, and to create a higher order function. And it is also useful to make your function pure and less prone to error. So this is some use cases of currying. Functions in JavaScript are a first-class object because they are treated as any other values in the language. They can be assigned to a variable. They can be properties of an object which are called method. They can be an item of an array, or they can be passed as argument to a function, and they can be written as the value of the function. So basically, a variable can do, a functions can also do. So if it stands for immediately invoked function expression, they are the function that are called immediately after being defined. We can make any a function if we by wrapping it uh, in the parenthesis and following a pair of parentheses at the end. For of loop is used to iterate over an element of an array. It does so nicely and shortly without the need of additional variables. The foreign loop is used to iterate over the properties of an object. A key is assigned to the key variable. The loop continues for all object properties. A Babel is a JavaScript transpiler that converts ES6 JavaScript into old ES5 JavaScript that can run in any browser. For every major release, the syntactical sugar is being added to the JavaScript, but that is not immediately supported by the browser. So to overcome this, Babel is used. Uh, During memory creation phase, JavaScript engine moves all your variables and function declaration at the top of the scope, and this is known as the hosting. DOM stands for Document Object Model. Basically, what happens when the browser or client sends the request to the server, then server sends us a different kind of data. It can be any HTML, XML, or OML, any kind of data. And when browser gets this data, it converts it into JavaScript objects with the help of inbuilt functions in the browser called parsers. And after that, browser stores this object in the memory, and this object is nothing but our document object model, means DOM, and its structure is like a tree of nodes where every node denotes the HTML element. So this is what a DOM is. Event loop is a runtime model which is present in JavaScript engine, and it continuously checks the call stack and the callback queue. And if there is a callback function waiting in the callback queue for execution, then it will be checks the call stack is empty or not. As soon as the call stack is empty, it will take that callback function from the call stack and push it into the call stack for execution. So this is the event loop. And just like the callback queue, there is another queue is present which is called micro task queue, which has higher priority than the callback queue, and the callback function which is attached with the promise is stored in this micro task queue. So a local storage and session storage both are browser storage. Local storage data persists until it deleted manually, whereas session storage data gets deleted whenever the user closes the browser or the tab. And the local storage and session storage, they both saves up to a 5 MB of data. Asynchronous programming means running a process individually from our main thread, and notifies the main thread when it gets complete. A main thread means our call stack. Shallow copy basically means that when we copy an object to another object, but their nested object still refers to the same memory location. So that is the shallow copy. But when we completely clone an object to another variable, so that even their nested objects points to the different memory location, is called a deep copy. So lexical scope means that the variable which was defined outside the function can be accessible inside some another function which was defined after its declaration. Of But opposite is not true. The variable which was inside the function, we cannot access that function outside. For example, if you have a function which was present in global scope, and inside that function we have some other function, some another function called, let's call it child. So through that child function, we can access the variable of its outer function scope as well as its outer means it's means global scope we can access. So the global scope, so here the global scope and that the scope of that parent function is the globe like is the lexical scope. The let is has a block scope, and a difference between let and where is the let has a block scope, and where keyword has the functional scope. So and we can reassign as well as redeclare the uh, a var variable, but in case of let we can redeclare, but we cannot reassign the let variable.